Hi, this is Philip Day from the Crowhurst battle team. Nick Austin and myself have put together an update on the work the team has been doing around Crowhurst over the last 2 weeks. And for those new to this, wondering what all the fuss is about and why can't we just believe the official narrative of events, we're here to show you the serious flaws in the official version of the Norman invasion, right down to where William's fleet landed, where his base camp was located, and most importantly, the site of the true epic confrontation of the Battle of Hastings itself. I'd like to thank the volunteers who came out on the Thursday and the Saturday in sometimes adverse wind conditions to peg out for the scans. Thank you very much for that, and we're going to see some good news coming out of this, I'm sure. So please put the kettle on, then put your feet up and enjoy the film.
William, 7th Duke of Normandy, made a battlefield oath that if he won the day, he would build an abbey on the site of his victory. History records that William won the hard-fought battle. This is what people have been told of the remains of the abbey William subsequently had constructed on the battle site. But more recently, new information has come to light that suggests that while the abbey we see today at Battle is without doubt a medieval construction, it wasn't the original abbey William had built, and more controversially, nor was this the site of England's most famous fight. A shopping list of anomalies raised by Nick Austin in his book casts grave doubt on the accepted version of events. In a Time Team program, The Lost Battlefield, hosted by Sir Tony Robinson, historians with differing views on the site of the battle were invited to present their theories. Most notably, no scientific evidence was presented by English Heritage for Battle Abbey being the genuine site, which their historians could easily have done. To this date, there has been no battlefield archaeology recovered at Battle, so we have to take English Heritage's word for it, which is an alarm bell for any genuine truth seeker. Which begs the question, is English Heritage charging people good money to walk around a field of no historical significance? It's an unwelcome question, but we should never shirk from challenging the accepted version of any event. The truth is the truth, whatever jacket it's wearing, and nobody likes to think that they've been fooled. The idea that historians may have got something this important so wrong shocks a lot of people, but big mistakes are always being made, and many of them quickly become the accepted and unquestioned narrative of our age, endorsed by the lofty imprimatur of university academics who write books and build reputations. The Battle of Hastings changed everything for England after 1066, and for many of us a strange bond links us to these kings and this battle going back 10 centuries, a nagging sense of questions unanswered, that history has still not finished with William and Harold, and that the secrets of the Norman invasion and the fate of the players are ever there to be discovered in the dusty rolls of parchments and the clay of the Weald.
Okay, so here we are in Crowhurst again. I thought it was time for us to do a summary of why we're here. We're here actually to do a ground radar survey of the important places in Crowhurst that we know of at the moment. We don't know if they're really important, but I have a feeling that we're going to turn something up.
Ground penetrating radar is a technique that looks into the ground non-invasively, which means it doesn't disturb the ground at all. What it actually does is it sends a radar wave down into the ground, and it squiggles down to the ground, and it bounces off of or reflects off of different properties, contrasting properties, like say a rock with soil over it. I'll see that boundary where the rock is. And by collecting data, I go in transects. So a transect is a straight line. And if you imagine a site like this as a square, and in that square you make a grid and you have straight lines every few feet, like say 3 feet, I use meters. So I have a line every meter and I collect data on those lines. So I go in straight lines, it's like mowing the lawn, and what you do is you add up all of this data, and you put your whole grid or this whole area in a software program when you get home at night, and you stack these slices up because it looks vertically into the ground like slicing. Think about a chocolate layer cake. It's like slicing down through a layer cake, and you can see all the different things underground. So when I get home, I stack that all up, and then I make it look like it's the actual ground surface. So all that information is in this cube. And then I can actually make maps at different depths of the features that are underground. And what we're hoping is that we'll be able to see the barn feature or the house feature, or the privy, the bathroom, which would be really cool to find of Tabitha Nelson's. But what's really important is that this actually will map a very large area that we could never excavate.
So here we are at the Manor House with an amazing piece of kit, an RD 1500, which is a ground radar, penetrating radar, can see down about 8 meters, and will give us a nice picture of what's there.
Okay, let's leave Nick and his team to start the first scans at the front of the manor. We're going to do a quick recap of the whole picture to gain some perspective, and then we'll look at everything from the air. For those who say there can be nothing new discovered about the Norman invasion or the Battle of Hastings 1,000 years after the event, I disagree. What if we've been looking in the wrong places for both William's landing site and the subsequent battle itself? There has been not one credible battle artefact ever found at the Battle Abbey site. If there had, it would be in Battle Museum. Instead, English Heritage is charging visitors a large sum of money to walk around a field of no historical significance, and we can be sure this mistake has been made because nature tells us.
To understand the overriding historical importance of the Wilting site, we must appreciate that the Sussex coastline facing William and his invasion force in 1066 was radically different from what we see today. In fact, only a fool would land at the place we call Pevensey today. Back then, a huge inland bay cut off Pevensey Castle from Hastings, necessitating a huge detour by foot to get to where the Norman army was supposed to have fought King Harold at the location of the modern-day town of Battle. The only way William could conceivably have crossed to Hastings if he landed at Pevensey Castle would be to re-embark his invasion force, sail across the mouth of Old Pevensey Bay, and then re-land his army on the other side. This plainly did not happen. William had planned this invasion with tremendous foresight right down to the last detail. His extensive spy network in England had provided superb G2. How credible is it that this veteran commander of a dozen campaigns would have made such an elementary and foolish blunder? In Secrets of the Norman Invasion, historian Nick Austin shows what the primary sources have to say on where William's army landed. In those days, the Coombe Valley Haven was a sheltered bay, where the busiest port on the south coast of England was located, the old port of Hastings. The topography of the inlet was perfect. Even if the English were waiting, William could continue further into the bay and land anywhere on several miles of shoreline around the inlet to avoid a direct attack. In fact, the landings were completely unopposed. The ships were beached along a wide section of the inlet, and troops and horses sloshed ashore along with tons of supplies and weapons that would be used on the campaign. The first task was to dismantle some of the ships and use the wood to construct the lower fort to protect the landing site against attack. This is alluded to in the Bayeux Tapestry, which actually shows two forts built at the landing site. A few days later, the Normans move up the hill and establish a second, more elaborate defensive headquarters at the Wilting site, labelled here as the Upper Fort. It is provocative that the remains of some of William's ships may still be earthed up down on the old shoreline, awaiting discovery and verification. As the centuries passed and the invasion slipped from the minds of men, the shoreline too began to change. The inlet silted up and the sea receded. Today we have one of the most beautiful marshland vistas in Sussex, alas, soon to play host to the East Sussex County Council and their link road, right through the site of the Duke of Normandy's Upper Fort site at Wilting. Okay, back to the present. That was a summary that we did back in 2012 about why we believe that the Bulverhithe is absolutely the place where William lands his army. Look at it. You can go anywhere. You're never going to be opposed. If you see an army waiting for you, you move to another part of that. And what I find also fascinating is this is an ancient site. The red ring on there shows where some boats, ancient boats, have been found prior to them putting in the road. Let's look at the satellite top-down view. Here are the landing sites. The old Hastings port, bottom right hand, and the inlet. Of course, you come straight off those boats, and immediately you've got defensive areas. The lower fort area is built there. Upper Fort is just a superb site on top of a hill and is William's headquarters. Here we see a shot of the north going with the sea in the distance of the landing sites. The lower fort area will be in the bottom left hand corner. And then if we turn around and face the other way, you're going to start to see that this is very close to the first Saxon defence line. So there's the upper fort area, Saxon defence line up there. If we plot it on Ordnance Survey, you have the lower fort here. You've got the old Hastings port right there, and just up on top of the knoll, the hill, the upper fort. The red route indicates the route that William takes his army to get off the peninsula. And what Harold's going to do is he's going to block William's attempts to do that. And this is an amazing sight because it is a short front, and it's got the Malfoss, the lower Malfoss on the right, and it's going to have woods on the left-hand side. So let's take a look at Nick's diagram of the old London Road, which is actually not what we see the road to be today. It takes a slightly different route, but if you have a look here, that's the Saxon defence line, just in front of those buildings. And in the foreground is the plain, so William's army is going to rush that and try to get across it and break down that shield wall so they can get off the peninsula.
On the night of the battle, Wace tells us they could see one another. The two camps could see one another. The Normans were in Wilting, and the Saxons were somewhere on the ridge. And so I started to look into this, and you find that there is one place that fits everywhere. Tells us that when they fought the battle, there was a huge ditch, and it was called the Malfoss, and the soldiers, the Norman soldiers, were killed in the ditch, and they passed it in the battle. In another commentary at the Chronicle of Battle Abbey, it tells us that there was a Malfoss, but it was at the end of the battle. So Poitiers is telling us there's one during the battle, there's another one telling us at the end of the battle. Doesn't seem to make any sense. There's no ditch in Battle Abbey. There's nowhere you can die. They say, oh, well, it might have been 3 miles behind the lines. Of course it wasn't. The whole point about the battle was it occupied a confined space, a place where the Normans were held on the peninsula. And the only place for that was Crowhurst.
It's an unidentified building in the middle of Crowhurst. There's no record of it in the historical record. There's no record of it in anything to do with Harold or anything to do with before then. And yet this site is huge. It's 80 metres long by 40 metres wide and has been level. When you look at the ground radar, which we've already had a peek at, you can see that 2 metres down there's a pretty level platform, and on top of that there's stuff, loads of stuff.
Oh, I see. Okay. Well, that's a right angle?
Yes.
Or no, you mean down the other end?
Yeah. This one should be there.
I'm not sure what you mean, actually. I'm going to show you.
Sorry.
There are 13 mounds down here in the gully, in the undergrowth, that I have to admit look like graves, but that's wishful thinking at this stage until we can get some evidence for it. But we're laying out the scanning grid to see if we can actually come up with anything.
Okay. Same with that one. Move that one up to the
other side of the rock.
see what you can
So I've got a
do.
question. What makes you think that that's a construction?
Uh,
You
be-
use the word construction.
Yep, because the stone layer goes all the way over the edge. Goes all the way over the edge. The top layer goes all the way over the edge.
Yeah.
The second layer looks like it probably does the same, but it's collapsed. So you can see that there's air pockets all under here, but the top layer hasn't.
Okay.
And also you can see there's a construction in the mound itself. It's not just a pile of earth, which you would expect. You'd expect just a pile of earth or a pile of silt or something. But here there's a layer, then there's some wood, then there's another layer, then more wood, and the wood is tightly knitted. It's not like just laid. It's tightly knitted. Whoever built this, I think they didn't want anyone to get inside it. In the Chronicle of Battle Abbey it says they buried their men in the bosom of the earth and moved on. Right? Here we are. The bosom of the earth. Now I've got to look with the ground radar to see what's really there.
It's hard to get on film what these mounds look like, but they're probably about 20 paces by 5 paces. And nobody builds a mound like this for no reason. And there's 13 of these things. And apparently there's a bunch more in the other valley. So if you're going to bury thousands of bodies, they estimate anywhere from 3,000 to 5,000 casualties at Hastings. And as Nick says, the Norman records indicate that the Normans were buried in the bosom of the earth. But you can't really see it, but there's just undulations. These are actually seriously large mounds, and we're going to find out what's in them.
And let it follow the contour.
So here we are in the sort of the middle plane of the battlefield, or might call it the top plane. My image of what's happening during the battle is changing as I'm getting more and more information coming in. Here there is a big pond right at the top of the hill, it's not the top of the hill, the top of the slope where the fighting clearly took place, and there's a defensive line just in front of it. And I'm quite convinced that the battle took place below this field and fought its way over the top. And I suspect the Blood Lake idea that came into existence was probably due to this little pond here being right at the top of the knoll, like a hillock in the middle of the battlefield.
Okay, so we're looking at what's potentially a defensive line here.
Yes.
In this tree line, which is a pretty ancient looking tree line, that's for...
Howell says that, Ray says they built 3 defences across the field. 3 enclosures, he called them. And I think this is one of the enclosures. The other one is at the bottom of the field, and the third one, the last one, was at the very back of this field.
We've employed the ground radar to look for bodies because bodies are the missing thing from Battle Abbey, and they're the missing thing from anywhere else. And if they're anywhere, they must be here somewhere. When I had a look at the first scans that came back from this great equipment, it shows clearly there are unidentified things in the ground in this field and in the other field.
Hope you enjoyed the film. We're going to keep you updated as to any further news regarding the professional appraisal of those scans that we were taking on various sites around the project. And as the weather clears up and we move towards spring, Nick's been talking about further adventures and further investigations in other aspects of this project, so be sure we'll keep you informed. Thank you for watching.